Let's not forget that while the voice of Yah is indeed heard in the sound of the shofar, perhaps a greater revelation of his voice is in the word of the Torah. Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, final day of the Yom Teruah special readings. And for those that will be gathering tonight at sundown, according to the rabbinical calendar, many will be gathering to begin this feast day. Chag Sameach to you. May you find your celebration real, powerful, and filled with the presence of the Most High. There are a couple of places not in the Torah, but in the Tanakh, that specifically refer to the seventh month, the first day of the month. It's interesting that they both pertain to the same historical day, just from two different books, from the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah or Nehemiah. In the book of Ezra, we're reading about the returnees from Babylon back to Israel, to the land, in particular to Jerusalem. And it says that they have began to inhabit the cities. Let's look at verse number 1 of chapter number 3. Ezra 3, verse 1. Now when the seventh new moon came and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered as one man to Jerusalem. And Yeshua the son of Jehozadak and his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and his brothers, arose and built the slaughter place of Elohim of Israel to offer ascending offerings on it, as it is written in the Torah of Moshe, the man of Elohim. So they set the slaughter place on its stands, being afraid of the peoples of the lands. And they offered ascending offerings on it to Yahweh, both the morning and the evening ascending offerings. This is the daily tamid, a lamb at 9 and a lamb at 3. And they performed the festival of Sukkot as it is written, the day of ascending offerings by number, according to the right ruling for each day. And afterward, the continual ascending offerings and those for the new moons and for all the appointed times of Yahweh that were set apart, also for everyone who volunteered a voluntary offering to Yahweh. It says here in verse number 6 that evidently prior to this establishment or the reestablishment of the altar so that they could present the prescribed offerings to Yah. Verse 6 says, from the first day of the seventh new moon, they began to offer ascending offerings to Yahweh, but the foundation of the Hekel, the temple, had not been laid. So this began on Yom Teruah, the reestablishment of temple worship, of Levitical worship, began on Yom Teruah. Now, let's continue with the book of Nehemiah, chapter number 8. Verse 1 says, and when the seventh new moon came, the children of Israel were gathered in their cities, and all the people gathered together as one man in the open space that was in front of the water gate. This is saying very similar to what Ezra has recorded. In particular, in the city of Jerusalem, they are now gathered at the water gate. And they spoke to Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the Torah of Moshe, which Yahweh had commanded Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the Torah before the assembly of both men and women and all who could hear with understanding on the first day of the seventh new moon. Now, let's pause there. This is the first of Tishri, the seventh new moon, and a couple of things are happening. Ezra says that it was on this day that they began to put together again the altar and to reestablish Levitical offerings of worship to the Most High. Nehemiah takes a little different recording narrative, and he says, in particular, that the people have gathered here and they ask for the Torah to be read to them. How long has it been since the Torah has been read? For many of them, they've not heard it in a long, long time. They have been living as exiles in Babylon. And while the later administrations in that area had become favorable to them, nonetheless, there were many perhaps that had not heard this word. And so the Torah scroll is brought out, and Ezra stands up on a platform. And when he opens the Torah, the people stand in honor and they worship. And they began to listen to him read the Torah. Now, it's interesting also that you and I have an awakening taking place in our hearts to where we want to hear the Torah read again. We were taught for many years, perhaps, in other institutions and places of worship that the Torah was of no consequence, that it had all been done away with. And yet, when we began to hear it again, sincerely and with an open ear, it breaks our heart. And it overwhelms us, and there is this great emotional attachment that begins to take place. It is significant to me that this is taking place at the Watergate. According to biblicalarchaeologytruth.com, it is thought that this particular gate was the entrance where water was resourced to bring up to the temple for use in the process of worshiping, refilling the temple's needs of water, and that this gate is connected to the Gihon Springs. In 2015, Laura, my wife, and I were able to go down to the old city and to go under the archaeological digs and get down to the root of the Gihon Springs source there, or at least its entranceway. And you take a flashlight and you need water shoes on, and you step down into those waters, and they are moving. This is a rapidly moving source of water. You go through a very narrow tunnel. At one place, I had to turn sideways to get through, and without the flashlight, you can't see anything. But the waters are cool, and they are refreshing. And it's an amazing journey as you hold your flashlight and you go through this rock-walled tunnel, being moved along by these waters, and you come back out to an exit area. I asked our guide, his name was Jamie, I said, these waters, these Gihon Spring waters, are they the same ones that will be released from their subterranean resource and flow down and bring healing to the Dead Sea waters, as Yehezkel 47 describes? With a big grin on his face, he said, yes, it's these waters. So the healing waters of Gihon Springs come through this particular gate. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 through 27 describe the washing of the water of the word, or the Torah, that cleanses the bride. Psalms chapter number 1, verse number 3 says that a tree planted by rivers of water, that is a Sadiq, a tree is a Sadiq, a righteous man, who lives continually in the Torah, it says he will bear fruit and his leaves will never fade. There will always be green. There will always be life in him. Revelations 22 and verse 1 says that a river of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. This river is the Torah, the washing of the water of the word. It's crystal clear, not muddied up with man's doctrine, not muddied up with man's opinions, but that which comes from the Lamb and from the authority of Yah is crystal clear. So these people wept and they cried. Why? Wouldn't they rejoice? The reality is the Torah was revealing their sins, and they wept. But they were encouraged. This is a day to rejoice. Go prepare foods and good things for those who don't have anything. because you've heard the word. May the word transform us on this Yom Teruah. Be blessed, my friend. Hag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.